We're putting Oscar Robertson through 5 GOAT standards to see if his legacy actually holds up. Disclaimer: this discussion is based on personal analysis and opinion. Different perspectives on the NBA GOAT are valid. I have created 5 categories, one, two, three, four, five, and we're going to test to see if his legacy is actually worthy of the GOAT debate. Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's dive right in. We'll go through those 5 categories and see how Oscar Robertson measures up in the GOAT debate. And just a note for anyone listening in, it's all about personal takes, and it's fine to have different views on who the GOAT might be.
Let's go with the first category: championship and team success. Rings are paramount, but also how the player led their team to those wins. Finals MVPs, playoffs, and playoff impact. Tell me your thoughts in regards to Oscar Robertson.
Sure thing. Let's break it down for Oscar Robertson in terms of championships and team success. Now, Oscar only won one NBA championship in 1971 when he teamed up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the Milwaukee Bucks. So, if we're talking sheer ring count, he's not up there with guys like Bill Russell or Michael Jordan. But that championship was still huge because it showed he could be a key piece on a title team once he had the right supporting cast. In terms of finals MVPs, he didn't win one, but he was a veteran leader and playmaker in that finals run. And looking at his overall playoff impact, he consistently put up strong numbers and was a floor general who could elevate his team's play. Even before that championship, he was the kind of player who made any team he was on a contender. So overall in this category, he's not a multi-ring superstar, but he definitely had a big enough impact to show he could lead and win at the highest level at least once.
Give him a star rating.
Absolutely. Let's give them a star rating. For the category of championships and team success, I'd say Oscar Robertson earns a solid 3 stars out of 5. He has that one championship to his name, which is significant, and he was a major contributor to his team's success, but he doesn't have the multiple rings or finals MVPs that would push him up to a higher rating.
Tell me, audience, do you agree or disagree? Let's move to the second category: statistical dominance, regular and postseason. Elite numbers in points, assists, rebounds, efficiency, PER, win shares, VORP, and defensive metrics. In regards to Oscar Robertson, tell me your thoughts.
Of course, diving into Oscar Robertson's statistical dominance is where he really shines. He's known for being one of the first players to average a triple-double for an entire season. He did that in the 1961-62 season with the Cincinnati Royals, which was just unheard of at the time. In terms of regular season stats, he was a scoring and assist machine. He consistently put up elite numbers in points and assists, and his efficiency was strong for his era. Metrics like PER, win shares, and even some of the advanced metrics that we look at now place him as one of the all-time great all-around players. In the postseason, he also maintained a high level of performance. Even if he didn't have as many deep playoff runs early in his career, he was still a statistical standout whenever he got there. So for giving a star rating for statistical dominance, I'd say Oscar is easily at a 5-star level here. He's a legend in that department and definitely one of the most statistically dominant players in NBA history.
Let's move to the third category: individual accolades. That's MVPs, All NBA, All Defensive Selections, Defensive Player of the Year, showing consistent recognition from peers and the media. In regards to Oscar Robertson, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's look at the individual accolades. Oscar Robertson definitely earned a good amount of recognition during his career. He was the league MVP in 1964, which is a huge mark of individual excellence, especially in an era full of legends. He was also a multiple-time All-NBA selection. He made the All-NBA first team for about a decade straight, which just shows how consistently he was recognized as one of the top players in the league. On the defensive side, all defensive team selections and Defensive Player of the Year awards weren't really a big thing until later on, so he doesn't have those on his resume. But still, he was consistently respected by both his peers and the media as one of the top talents of his time. So for individual accolades, I'd give him a strong 4.5 stars out of 5. He has that MVP, lots of All-NBA nods, and a whole lot of respect, even if he didn't have the defensive awards that came later.
Let's move to the next category: peak performance and dominance. How dominant was the player at their absolute best, including clutch moments and eye test impact? In regards to Oscar Robertson, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's talk about peak performance and dominance. So, when it comes to Oscar Robertson at his best, he was just a complete force of nature on the court. During his prime years, especially in the early 60s, he was arguably the most well rounded offensive player in the league. He could score, he could pass, he could rebound, and he could just take over a game with his basketball IQ and his physicality. In terms of clutch moments in the eye test, he was absolutely the kind of player who looked like he was in control whenever he was on the floor. He had this calm but commanding presence, and people who watched him play will tell you he just made everything look smooth and effortless. So, for rating him on his peak dominance, I'd say he's easily at about 4.5 stars out of 5. He was one of the best of his era at his absolute best, and he left a lasting impression on anyone who saw him play.
Let's move to the fifth category, longevity and sustained excellence. Maintaining elite production over a long career, impacting multiple eras and teams. In regards to Oscar Robertson, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's wrap it up with longevity and sustained excellence. Now, this is another area where Oscar Robertson really stands out. He played 14 seasons in the NBA, and for pretty much all of those seasons, he was an elite player. He came into the league and made an immediate impact, and he stayed at a high level well into his 30s. He also managed to be a star on multiple teams and across different eras of the game. He started off with the Cincinnati Royals and then went on to win his championship with the Milwaukee Bucks alongside Kareem. Even as the league evolved, he remained a relevant and influential player. So in terms of longevity, I'd say he definitely deserves another 4.5 stars out of 5. He had a long, consistently excellent career and left a legacy that spanned multiple eras of the NBA.
You've managed to give Oscar Robertson a star rating across the 5 different categories that I created. But we have a problem here. I need one overall star rating. So can you combine them and help me out with that?
Absolutely. Let's put it all together. So we gave him about 3 stars for championships and team success, 5 stars for statistical dominance, 4.5 stars for individual accolades, 4.5 stars for peak performance and dominance, and another 4.5 stars for longevity and sustained excellence. Averaging those out, he ends up roughly around 4 to 4.5 stars overall. He's definitely a legend who checks a lot of boxes, and while he might not have the sheer ring count of some other GOAT contenders, his all-around greatness and consistency definitely put him in that elite conversation. So let's call it a solid 4.5 stars overall.
Audience, let me know, do you agree or disagree with anything that AI has to say? And also let me know, do you agree with me? Because when it comes to the GOAT debate, I feel like the person's game need to transcend across eras. So in regards to Oscar Robertson, his game need to transcend across eras. That's the 1960s, I would say, all the way up to the 2010s. So I'm going to ask these questions again, but I'm going to change them just a little bit. So in regards to the first category, championships and team success, let me know. Once again, this is across all eras in regards to Oscar Robertson, and you got to factor in the rule changes. Tell me your thoughts.
Absolutely. Let's factor in that cross era lens. When we're talking about championships and team success for Oscar Robertson across all eras, it does get interesting. You know, the game has changed a lot from the 1960s to the 2010s, from the 3 point line to the pace of the game, and even how teams build around stars. If we imagine Oscar playing in modern eras with those rule changes, like hand checking being gone and more spacing on the floor, he might actually thrive even more as a playmaker and scorer. He'd have more room to operate, and his basketball IQ would translate really well. On the flip side, the level of athleticism and the focus on 3 point shooting in the modern game would mean he'd need to adapt a bit. But given how skilled he was, he'd likely still find ways to lead his team to success. So overall, I'd say across eras, he'd still be capable of driving a team to a championship under the right circumstances. He might not rack up multiple rings like a Jordan or a LeBron, but he'd still be a championship caliber leader in any era. So factoring in all those rule changes, I'd still give him a pretty strong rating for championship potential across the board.
Let's move to the second category, statistical dominance, regular and postseason. Now, once again, this is across all eras in regards to Oscar Robertson, and you also got to factor in those rule changes. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's dive into that. So, if we're looking at Oscar Robertson's statistical dominance and imagining him playing across all eras, it's pretty fascinating because his game was so well rounded. With the rule changes and the evolution of the game, I think he'd still be a statistical powerhouse. For example, in today's era with more pace and space, he'd probably rack up even more assists and have better efficiency thanks to the spacing. The three-point line might add a new dimension to his game, and while he wasn't a three-point shooter in the 60s, a player of his skill would likely adapt and add that to his arsenal. He'd still be a triple-double threat, and his ability to read the floor and stuff the stat sheet would translate in any era. In the postseason, he'd probably continue to shine as well, because great playmakers and versatile players tend to find ways to excel in any era's playoff environment. So overall, I'd say that across eras, he'd remain a statistical standout, and he'd probably still be putting up elite numbers in any generation of the NBA.
Now let's move to the third category, individual accolades. Now when it comes to this category, you got to factor in a couple more things. In regards to Oscar Robertson, you also got to factor in the rule changes as well as other elite players that's going after those same awards. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's factor all that in. So, if we're looking at individual accolades for Oscar Robertson across eras, it does get even more competitive. The number of superstars going for MVPs and All NBA spots is definitely higher in some of the modern eras. You've got legends in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and beyond, and a lot of them are vying for the same top penners. Now, Oscar was a dominant MVP in his own era, and he was a perennial All NBA first teamer. In a more crowded field, he'd still be recognized for his greatness, but he'd have more rivals for those awards, players like Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and others depending on the era. And with the rule changes and the evolution of the game, he might have to adapt a bit to stand out defensively or to keep up with different styles of play. But given his talent, he could still collect a lot of accolades. He might not dominate the awards scene as consistently as he did in the 60s, but he'd still be a perennial all-star and a frequent All-NBA selection. So overall, I'd say across eras, he'd still be racking up a lot of individual honors, even if the competition might trim a few from his trophy case compared to his original era.
Now let's move to the fourth category, peak performance and dominance. Once again, across all eras, factoring in the rule change in regards to Oscar Robertson. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, let's tackle that. When we think about Oscar Robertson's peak performance and dominance across all eras, he was just such a versatile and intelligent player that I think his peak would translate really well. He had that rare ability to control the game as a big guard, and that would make him a matchup nightmare in any era. With the rule changes like the removal of hand checking and the emphasis on spacing, his playmaking and ability to get to the rim would probably shine even more. He could be just as dominant as explorer and passer, and he'd likely have even more highlight reel moments and clutch performances given the modern style of play. So if we consider his peak performance in any era, I'd say he'd still be a standout star. He'd adapt to different styles of play and still be one of those players who could take over games and leave a huge impression. So yeah, his peak would hold up just fine across the board.
Let's move to the fifth category, longevity and sustained excellence. Once again, across multiple eras, factoring in the rule changes in regards to Oscar Robertson. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's wrap it up with longevity and sustained excellence across eras. Now, Oscar Robertson had a long and consistently excellent career in his own time, and I think that would hold true in other eras as well. With his skill set, basketball IQ, and adaptability, he'd likely remain a top-tier player for a long time, no matter the era. Of course, different eras come with different physical demands and styles of play, but a player as fundamentally sound and versatile as Oscar would find ways to stay relevant. He might adjust his game as he got older, maybe lean even more into his playmaking and leadership, but he'd still be a valuable contributor on any team. So I think about longevity and sustained excellence across multiple eras, I'd say Oscar would still maintain a long, distinguished career. He'd be one of those players whose game ages well and who stays impactful well into his later years, regardless of the decade.
Now let's move to the bonus round. The bonus round consists of two categories, and once again, this is across all eras. Those two categories are the slam dunk contest as well as the three-point contest. In regards to Oscar Robertson, do you think he would not only participate, but will walk away with some trophies?
All right, let's jump into that bonus round. So when we're talking about Oscar Robertson and the slam dunk contest, well, he was definitely more of a fundamentally sound all-around player than a high-flying dunker. He had the size and the skill, but he wasn't really known for flashy aerial moves. So if he did participate, he'd probably be more of a long shot to win a dunk contest, especially against the high flyers of later eras. I'd say he probably skipped that one, or at least not come away with a trophy there. Now, the three-point contest is an interesting what-if because the three-point line didn't exist in his era. He wasn't a three-point shooter by nature, but if he had grown up in a later era and developed that shot, he might have added it to his game. Still, he was more of a mid-range and inside-the-arc maestro, so it's a bit of a stretch to see him as a three-point contest champion compared to pure shooters of later eras. So I'd say he might not walk away with trophies in those particular contests, but he'd still be a legend in all the other ways that count.
Let's assume that you have an elite player, and this elite player is very, very skilled. But this elite player is missing one skill, and that one skill is inside of Oscar Robertson. What skill are you plucking out of Oscar Robertson and putting into your elite player to make them more complete?
All right, let's play that little game. So, if you have this elite player who's already very skilled but is missing one crucial skill and you want to borrow something from Oscar Robertson, I think the number one thing you take is his incredible court vision and playmaking ability. Oscar was known as one of the greatest floor generals ever, and his ability to see the floor, make the right pass, and elevate his teammates was just on another level. So if you've got an elite player who needs that one extra skill to be complete, you give them Oscar's playmaking and court vision. That would turn that into a true all-in-on floor leader and make them even more complete.
Let's assume that you own an NBA team and you have the option of adding Oscar Robertson to your roster. Now, is Oscar Robertson a starter or would he be coming off the bench?
If you've got Oscar Robertson on your roster, he's definitely a starter. I mean, a player of his caliber and his basketball IQ, you're going to want him on the floor leading your team from the opening tip. He's going to be one of those guys who makes everyone around him better and helps set the tone for how you play. So there's no question, he's going in your starting lineup and he's going to be one of your key pieces right from the jump.
When it comes to the GOAT debate, people like to judge within the top 10 players of all eras combined. Now, let me know when it comes to Oscar Robertson, is he a part of those top 10? If so, what number do he fall under? And if he's outside of 10, what number do he fall under?
Absolutely. The GOAT debate top 10 is always a fun and pretty subjective conversation. I think Oscar Robertson definitely belongs somewhere in that broader top 10 conversation. He's often placed in that top 10 or just on the fringe of it, depending on who you ask. There are so many legends, guys like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kareem, Magic, Bill Russell, so it does get crowded. But Oscar's all-around game, his triple-double legacy, and his impact on the point guard position definitely earn him a spot in that top tier of all-time greats. If I had to put a number on it, he might land somewhere around the back half of the top 10, maybe somewhere around 8th to 10th, depending on how you rank others. If he's outside the top 10, he's not far out. Maybe he'd be somewhere in that 11 to 13 range. It's all a matter of personal preference, but he's definitely in that elite conversation.
So let me know, do you think his legacy makes him worthy of the GOAT debate?
I'd say Oscar Robertson absolutely deserves to be in the GOAT debate conversation. His legacy is incredibly strong, and he was a pioneer as a big guard who could do it all. He changed the way people viewed the point guard position and left a lasting mark on the game. So while there are other players who have stronger cases based on championships or different achievements, Oscar's all-around game and his impact in basketball history definitely make him worthy of being in that GOAT debate mix.
So help me understand something. I believe you said his overall star rating was 4.5 or 4.2, somewhere up in there. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you said he's an 8 or 9, and for some people, he might be outside of the top 10. Then you say he's also worthy of the GOAT debate. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me clarify that a bit. So, when I mentioned that kind of overall star rating, like around a 4.5 out of 5, that's just a way of saying he's an all time great across those categories. And when I say he might be around 8th or 9th in a top 10 or just outside of it, it's really about how crowded that top 10 conversation is. You've got so many legends in the mix, and different people will rank them in different ways. But being in the GOAT debate doesn't necessarily mean you have to be number 1 or number 2. It means you're one of those players who deserves to be in that all time conversation. So even if some people place him 8th, 9th, or just outside the top 10, he's still absolutely worthy of being part of that big picture GOAT discussion because of what he brought to the game.
Well, that's the video. Let me know in the comments, do you agree or disagree with anything the AI has to say? Also, put those questions in the comments. Those questions represent what do you think I should have asked that I didn't ask. Put those names in the comments. Those names represent the people that you want me to do videos on next. Be sure to like, share, watch more videos, and subscribe to the channel.